Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I have a special no-spoiler review of the Gollum game for you all. Thank you to the team behind the Gollum game, the Daedalic Entertainment franchise, for sending me a review key and a press kit for this game. It was very kind of you, but I won't let this affect my review of the game because the honesty of it all means much more to me. There are a lot of positives about the game, but definitely a few negatives that we'll get into in a bit. Now, of course, as a Lord of the Rings fan and channel, I love to see projects like this, and innately want something like this to be good and to succeed, but as always, I will try my best to maintain my fairness and impartiality in this review, because I owe that to you all, now and always. So far, I have played through 3 chapters out of the 10 chapters that this game offers, so I have a fair amount of the game to base this review off of, but I do plan to make another video, a lore review discussing spoilers concerning the story, characters, and settings when I finish the game sometime over the next week or so. For this review, I will stay spoiler-free, at least as much as I can, since we know the story of Gollum from the books, but we're not quite sure how the game will portray such events. And I will also try to keep this as short as possible to provide my perspective on the game overall, and whether it is or is not worth getting as of launch day, May 25th, 2023. Let's get into it. To start off, let's talk about what this game is. It is a game where you are solely following the tale and adventures of Gollum when he is hunting for Bilbo and the ring. Thus, while there are some stealth mechanics, very, very light fighting mechanics, and so on, this game is actually much more of a 3D platformer full of running, jumping, crawling, climbing, and the like, with some puzzles thrown in there as well. While a couple moments had me confused and stumped for a while in a good way, the puzzles and so forth aren't very complex. The game is rated T, which makes sense for the violence and suffering that can be shown in the game, especially in Mordor, which is where the game really starts, but it is not much. In fact, the game is very light in tone generally, and it makes me wonder if this is how Gollum sees himself in his own story, and that's why he's generally much more innocent-seeming than in many of his other depictions on screen and in games, which would actually be a neat framing device for all of this. Now, sometimes that innocent Gollum does somewhat break the immersion a bit, how soft this version of Gollum is, but it makes him much more approachable in some ways as well, especially as the character that you're playing as. This brings me to the graphics, too. As I posted a few days ago, the Gollum game is strangely demanding of one's PC system, but can run on most last-gen and current-gen consoles. I believe that they're fixing and lowering a lot of the requirements to fit many more PC systems as well, but from what's been released, it's been strangely demanding. But there are still glitches and graphic bugs as well, and I think some patches will help with that. Some character faces, for instance, don't move when they are talking at points, and weird bugs like that do occur. But it's a new game, and generally it is a pretty finished game, and it's still playable. I would advise looking to make sure your system meets its standards before buying it, of course. Finally, as this is a lore channel, I will briefly say that I am incredibly satisfied with the lore, when it is there. The settings, characters, story, and voices seem so authentic with their Tolkienian elements, which is my favorite part of this entire game. Of course, there are inventions of characters and so forth on behalf of the game, but they certainly fit with the world and ambience of Middle-earth, in my opinion. It's really easy to get immersed in this game. The references to lore, characters, voice acting, all of that is so awesome. And again, there are very minimal lore changes. There are points in the game where Gollum and Smeagol argue, and it is up to you to choose a side, and I absolutely love that mechanic. I hoped that this game would have something like that, and I am so very glad to see that it does. Now, even though I do sing its praises there, I will temper that with some criticism now, bringing us to what the game is not. While the lore of the game is wonderful when you get it, most of what I've seen so far, and I've played nearly a third of the game, is not really based around much of the story and the lore, but lots of random tasks and chores that are assigned to you as Gollum. Walk over here, pull 5 of these levers, return to your cell. Go put these creatures in cages, return to your cell. Go collect these tags, return to your cell. It can get quite monotonous quite quickly, unfortunately. Again, at least in the earlier levels of the game. Perhaps it does change later on, but in the first 3 levels, it's a lot of stuff like that. Strangely enough, this game can also feel somewhat disjointed. Gollum talks about doing something, for instance, investigates doing it, returns to his cell, and then there's a time skip and I'm doing something else entirely right away. And there's not much returning to that original point. The game is not like other previous Lord of the Rings video game entries. There's not a lot of combat, not really at all, to be honest, since it is Gollum that we are playing as. It has more emphasis on the platforming aspect, the tasks at hand, the puzzles, and the adventuring of it all, than it does on the story elements. The story that is there is quite rich and interesting, but again, that does not seem to be the main point of the game at many spots, as you do one task or another. The tasks themselves vary from rather mundane to actually quite interesting, as there's this puzzle of trying to hatch a bird, for instance, and I actually quite enjoyed that. I think if you walk into the game knowing what it is, what to expect, and what it's not, you'll have a good time with it. The game is roughly around 20 hours long, depending on time taken during exploration, problem solving, etc. Again, I've played through 3 out of 10 chapters, and I've played for about 3.7 hours. For my final point in the review, with all of that being said, it is a $50 game. As a huge Lord of the Rings fan myself, I think it is a great game to buy and play if you enjoy these types of games, and if that price doesn't seem to be too much. To be honest, I do like video games with more emphasis on story and combat being combined and influencing one another, but I have been having a fairly good time with this game as well. I would recommend watching gameplay to make sure that this is the kind of game you would like to play before buying. I believe Nerd of the Rings actually put some gameplay up on his channel yesterday, which I'll link in the description and cards. But concerning the other things, the lore, how it runs, the immersion, and so forth, it is enjoyable. Overall, I think I would give this game a 7 out of 10, if a 5 out of 10 is an average game, and a 10 out of 10 is absolutely immaculate, almost unattainable. I think a 7 out of 10 is a fair score for it. Again, it could change by the time that I hit the end of the game. I'll let you all know in my lore review. It is a solid Lord of the Rings game in its own way, and unlike other game entries we've seen into the world of Middle-earth, it's something new, and I appreciate that this was made, and that they put so much time and effort into it. I'm excited to play more, and to come back and make a lore review of it for you all. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this review has been interesting and helpful to those of you who are thinking about buying it. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery Lord of the Rings swords, statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and use the code WEST at checkout, and please check out our merch and Patreon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members, Peter Sheppard, Jonathan Putnam, Blair Scouten, Merten, John Hume, Sam mcbee, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibs, Rhys Jenkins, Anna Petrlik, Anthony Harmon, Arthur Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswald Project, and King of Games 2500. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members for your support of this channel. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.